it just started something, accelerated something that was already happening. And so with you all, when you work with young people and you work with people in the evangelism space and in the discipleship space, is understand what's happening in the church. And so I just thought through some simple information here that might be helpful to you. It would be really helpful as you think about how you work with the next generation, because it's going to be radically different. And if you ever have any pastors, or if you have pastors in your life, encourage them right now, because we're all just like every business. It's not, church isn't a business, but we're just all trying to figure this out. And stuff is changing so rapidly. And that's the number one thing that you have to understand, is that for teenagers, like all of us, stuff is changing so rapidly that we can't even plan for things, right? Does anybody feel that? Like we can't plan 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, 7 year, 10 year down the road. And young people, in the span of, just think about the last 10 years, how much technology's changed in us, right? I was carrying a BlackBerry 10 years ago. Right? Now this thing shoots better than any DSLR, right?
I miss my BlackBerry.
Yeah, I know. I miss there was sensation in all you could do, or like there was satisfaction in all you could do was do email. Wasn't it nice? But the fact that this has more computing power than what we had going to the moon, right? Think about that. It's incredible to think about. But we're also moving into the people that I love to listen to is a guy by the name of Mark Sayers. He's actually he's a pastor, but he's really a sociologist out of Australia. In the Pacific Northwest, you all, looking at all of you, in the Pacific Northwest, when we look at who to listen to, I really always encourage people to listen to people in Australia, UK, or Canada, because we are a post-Christian society. So your kids that you're working with, you're almost up into a pre-Christian society. What that means is that this next generation won't have grandma dragging them to church on Christmas. So they may not actually have ever heard the gospel, especially the junior high kids that are coming out. They weren't forced to go to church just out of social pressure. So many of them, their parents weren't forced like that. So they weren't going in there. So they're going to have no context. So it's really important to understand that we are in a post-Christian culture here in the Pacific Northwest, probably moving into, in the next, 5, 10, 15 years, into what's called pre-Christian context, which means you can't even make assumptions when you share the gospel. It's really interesting. They would have no context for it. Now, with the American context, it might be different, but really my buddies out in the UK, they're looking at the Pacific Northwest and they're saying, you guys really need to be watching what's happening with us rather than in some of the other places. So it's just something to think about when we think about the church in America, or in the Pacific Northwest. There's my friend Mark Sayers, and I stole this completely from him, but he said there's 2 critical issues that are facing the church in the next 10 years. And these are critical issues, I think, that are going to be facing, that young life's going to be facing as well. And the first one is that there's increasing fragility of people raised in the Western cultures. Increasing fragility of people raised in the Western cultures. So we've been raised in a society where we're told to avoid tough things. Do you guys feel that? Like it's a society where your comfort and avoiding tough things and really embracing the toughness of life is something that we're trying to move as far away from as we can. But one of the challenges with it is that the gospel and growth in discipleship is embracing the tough things of life and the tough things in the deep insides. I wore a shirt here that says, "Heart work is holy work." I was going to wear it, but it's too cold. But I have a shirt that says that because it's really getting kids to dig in deep when society's telling them not to dig in deep, right? Not to really go into tough things. Discipleship and what Jesus asks people to do is really a hard selling point at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like when we live in a society that's saying culture is telling us that comfort is what the most important thing is, and we're asking people to die to themselves and give their lives for someone else, it's really hard for us. So when we're working with kids, it's going to be really important for us to understand that there's, in the Western culture, that fragility of people is a thing, right? And so it's going to be really hard. How do we disciple people in that? The second one is that there's this different opinion on what community looks like, right? So people are looking for community, but compared to previous generations, there's a growing decrease and commitment to things. So they're increasingly, people believe that they should belong without having to really have any responsibility or really have any commitment. Does that make sense? So churches are seeing this all the time. So people are nowhere to be found, and then when their life collapses, all of a sudden they're there and the church has to take care of them. Or they feel bad because the church wasn't there when they were going through something, but they were so disconnected that no one could have known that. So the next generation, and to be honest with you, my generation, our generation, they want to belong without any of the responsibility of belonging. It's really, really challenging, right? So it's like, I want everyone to adhere to my needs, and they're asking the church that, and they're going to ask Young Life that, right? And it's going to be really, really hard. Young Life leaders, it's going to be really, really hard when that kid doesn't text you back, or he doesn't call you back, or he doesn't show up to the meeting, but then still wanting you to belong when his life's going down the tube, right? And us as Christians, we have to understand that that's going to be a big thing. Now, how we do that, the other thing is it's going to be really hard with young people and getting them for volunteerism. It's going to be a huge thing. People do not want to, and I don't know what it was. It sounds like it was going this way, but there is a huge level of people not wanting to commit to anything. I don't know if anybody's felt that. I mean, literally, like, I'll be meeting with people, and people are like, hey, we need to meet, and they'll be like, yeah. Let me hit you up like the day of to see if I want to. Like, it's really like people are telling me that, right? It's like, how do you plan your life when it's just like I'm sitting on this? And so it's really something to think about for us as leaders, and for you all as leaders when you're working with kids. Like, it's a real hard thing to get them to commit, but don't give up on it. We don't not hold them accountable to a commitment, because that's going to be a big thing as we look at what the church looks like. The other thing is that there's going to be an increased, and we know this, there's going to be an increased look at multiculturalism, right? Like young people, and want to make sure that the groups that they're joining reflect their community. And so that's a big thing for us, is just to make sure that we are focused on multiculturalism, and then also that there's going to be increase in, like, digital engagement is going to be how you reach kids, but you cannot stop there. That is, like, I'm a big believer in this. We still don't stream our services online. It's probably the worst decision that I've made, but I refuse to do it. We put our sermon, Eddie and I put our sermons out there because you can catch up if you want, but we're not going to let you sit in your living room and not connect with community, because it's very, very hard to actually know what's going on with somebody. You can engage them digitally, but you got to look them in the eyes, and you got to make sure that they're okay, because there's so much that you can hide behind digitally, right? And so that's a big thing, is how do you engage digitally? Of course, yes, we engage digitally, but it can't end there. And that's a big thing. We kind of think, you can, as a church leader, you can say, oh, we got this many views, right? And then you even dig in. Like, I'll be honest with you. You can look at views of anything. You dig into Facebook and YouTube, and you look at how many people actually watch more than like 14 seconds. Right. It's pretty low. And it makes you feel bad about yourself, but you got to do it. But really, it's really hard to get people to engage digitally. And so it's a huge focus for us at my church at Redeem. We're trying to think through, how do we engage people? We're fine digital. We're going to engage digitally, but man, it is face-to-face deep discipleship, because right now more than ever, we need deep discipleship, not surface-level discipleship. And I think that's where the church has found itself having a hard time, is really just surface-level discipleship. And so we're really trying to figure that out. The last one is that all of you, and me, myself, I'm having a hard time with this, is that we have to be ready for tense conversations. The world is moving so fast that it's so hard that we have to be experts at tough conversations. And so that's one of the things that we've been focusing on, is how do we have tough conversations really well? Because we're moving into what some people are calling a complex world. We went from complicated to complex. And what they're saying is, in complicated world, you're going to have challenges, right? A complicated world, but things move slow enough that you have time to figure it out. And oftentimes in a complicated world, like Young Life, like when you think about what you're doing, in a complicated world, or in a complicated world, you're trying to figure out, and you can basically solve for problems that you have, and you have a long time to do it. Complex world is very, very interesting, and churches are trying to figure this out. But complex worlds they're trying to figure out that so much is moving all at one time, and it's things outside of people's control, and things are happening to people that's outside the core of who they are, right? And so a complex world means that at any given time, you're going to have these conversations that are complex in nature. So the same thing that you work like you can't really build a model for working with kids right now, right? Because like kids are so different. There's this thing where when I was in high school, there was only the radio, right? And like television show was like TGIF, right, brother? You know. Does anybody remember TGIF?
Holla,
Yes,
come on
yes.
now.
Everyone watched Full House,
Yes.
and everyone watched Family Matters.
Yep.
That's a complicated world. And what I mean by that is that everyone everything is in this story. So if you were into Zelda, let's use Zelda. Does anybody remember Zelda?
Holla, yeah.
The
Come on
Nintendo
now.
game?
It's still around.
Yeah. If you were into Zelda, and when I was in high school, and nobody else in your high school was into Zelda, you just kind of held it behind and didn't tell anybody, right? Because you had to fit into the group, right? In a complex world, what's really interesting is that these people now, because of the internet, your youth can get connected to anything anywhere in the world. So they might be like into blue Zelda only, not green Zelda, right? And there's a website, I guarantee, for blue Zelda fans. Like, it is really, really hard. And so a complex world is that your students that you're talking to, and you say, okay, my students are in Steilacoom High School. They're experiencing 1,000 different worlds outside of Steilacoom High School. They're experiencing the same thing in some capacity. But basically what I'm trying to say is what worked with one student won't work with the next student, because they're not sharing the same story anymore, right? If I took each one of your iPhones, and let's say that we all had iPhone 12s, and some of us are Android people, we'll leave them out.
Yeah, gang, gang.
No. But if we had iPhone 12s and we put them all on the table, if they weren't turned on, they would look exactly the same. We hit the power, and all of our iPhones are completely different. My apps are completely different than your apps. Some of us have TikTok, others don't. Some of us have never heard of TikTok.
We're not pointing fingers.
Yeah.
We're not pointing fingers.
I'm making him a star in TikTok.
Holla.
He doesn't even know. But one of the things that is really important that we have to understand is that that's the world that people are experiencing. So it used to be 10 years ago that I'm going to Steilacoom High School and these kids are all experiencing the same things. Yes, in some ways they are, but they're experiencing something completely broader than that. And there's no shame with it, right? That's the thing. It's like, if you were into Zelda at my high school, the peer pressure was going to make you not into Zelda. That's not true anymore, right? And it's a good thing. In a lot of ways, it's good. It's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's very complex what you're doing. What we're doing in what I call face-to-face ministry has never been more complex in the face of the world. I mean, it really hasn't. And discipleship models and everything that you read, you can read those, but I'm telling you, in like 3 months, they might be obsolete. And so the same principles work, but we have to be into understanding the unique like nature of what everyone is experiencing in this moment. So I hope that didn't depress you very much. That's the world that we're faced. And it's really, really awesome that you guys are willing to step into it to work with kids. But it's just something to really understand. And churches are facing it more than any. And so it's one of those things where going back to normal church, this is a time of innovation. And that's the big thing. That the number one people that are going to survive and thrive in this, and it includes in the church space, are spiritual entrepreneurs. People that are willing to try things completely different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it might be, instead of texting with kids, like literally sending them videos every morning, just praying for them. I have a guy, he's not even a spiritual entrepreneur, but this dude in my church, he literally just hops on his phone on the way to work and he records prayers for random people, audio prayers. So he doesn't, and you wake up in the morning, 6 a.m., and you got a prayer from Brian, and it is an audio prayer. That's a real personal way to connect with him. It's a real simple thing, but entrepreneurship, even amongst us, is going to be very important. And sharing information of what worked. So just like ideas that you all have, like, man, this kid finally returned my call when I did this. Or, hey, I've been sending these little video messages to my student leaders, and they've been responding like this, where they won't text me back for the life of me. Just stuff like that you kind of share is really how this is going to work. Because unfortunately, no one has a blueprint for what worked. And what worked in 2019, sorry, it's just crazy, right? And so we're just all dealing with it. And so I wish I had more news, but but really to understand, I'm not giving you like these 3 things are working. It's understanding where the people's brains are going. And it's really important to think about that. Also remember that people's brains now, like I think it was like 20 years ago, the average cut in a movie was like 20 seconds. Now the average cut is less than 3 seconds. Okay. Think about that. 3 seconds. Like if you watch the Lego movie, I watched a Lego movie with my kids. I have to take a break from it because I got to take a breather because it's like the cut of a Lego movie is like 1 point something. It's just crazy. The amount of stimuli that's coming at these kids is absolutely unbelievable. And the amount of dopamine that we're throwing into them is unbelievable. They're not understanding how to deal with it. So anyway,
last thing, Kurt, because I'm about to lose the light. I'm going to turn off the video here in a second. You told me, there was one thing you told me today when we were talking.
Yes.
So if you want to share that one last one so I get on video.
I don't know if anybody's read, there's a Fuller Youth Institute. I don't know if you guys have read it. The Sticky Faith. Have you guys, everyone's read it? Oh, okay. Then you guys know. I think the big thing for you is what you're doing is you're being heroes. Because the number one, I remember I went to a church, a United Methodist church, and it was confirmation. I think I'm in an evangelical church now. I want to bring back confirmation. Like, do your church do confirmation? I love confirmation.
Christ Lutheran does.
Yeah.
Christ Lutheran does.
Yeah, amen. 13 years old, 83-year-old Wilbur. Literally, I'm from Indiana. Bob Evans. Does anybody know what Bob Evans is? It's like a biscuits and gravy place. He took me out every Saturday for a year, and we just talked about things. It was Wilbur is the most impactful person into my faith outside my family. And what the number one thing that I would say is that the number one way that kids stay sticky in their faith is they see somebody outside of their parents. Unfortunately, I hate this, but parents have very little influence on this. I mean, they do. We set the way. Yeah. But when they have a relationship with another adult who models faith to them, it's the number one way that people keep their faith in college.
So say it one more time, Kurt, because it's on video, and I want to make it clear. Yeah, so the number one way adolescents...
Well, there's a variety.
There's a variety, but this is one of the most important ones.
One of the most important was that somebody outside their friend, and particularly their parents' friends. I know that was one of them. But really, you guys too. Like somebody outside their family that's modeling what it means to be a believer. Like that's a huge thing. It normalizes it for kids. It helps them see it. And it's caught, not taught. You can say whatever you want, but them seeing you living out your faith, way better. The more you can do with kids that just let them see your faith is huge, right?